And I'm here. I'm speaking to you from downtown Kherson. As tonight gets dark, people are gonna go to their homes without electricity, without water, and very often without much food to eat. With your help together, I know we will not leave the people of Ukraine alone.
The latest from AccuWeather at the top and bottom of the hour. Only on AM 860, The Answer.
Today we'll have sunshine and a high 65. Tonight, clear skies and a low 47. Tomorrow, partly sunny with a high 73. Tomorrow night, mostly cloudy with a low 62. Sunday, partly sunny and warm with a high 83. Get your weather news when and how you want it, wherever you are. Download our free app or visit AccuWeather.com. With your AccuWeather forecast, I'm Garrett Beck on AM 860, The Answer.
For everything from questions about cucumbers to homes on cul-de-sacs, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb in Real Estate Show with Stan DeFreitas, the dad, and James DeFreitas, the son. For the next hour, call in with your questions about gardening, growing your favorite veggies, and growing your profits in real estate. Locally, call 813-289-1860. Toll free at 877-969-8600. And now your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And a big good morning or good evening, depending on when you're listening. And of course, you may be on Facebook, maybe on YouTube. We are here. I should say James is off. I like to say he's on assignment. Assignment probably sleeping, but I am here, and we usually record a couple shows, and then I do a live show. Today is a live show, and so if you're listening to me, we are able to answer your questions. Today is Sunday the 29th, so if you were listening to this any other time, well, then of course it's not live. But if you have a question, remember the numbers the gentleman just mentioned, the 1-877-969-8600 if you're outside the area, or if you're in anywhere in the Tampa Bay area from Lakeland to Sarasota, you can give us a call. Give me a call this morning at 813-289-1860. One of the things I wanted to mention, and that is trees. Look at your trees. This is your assignment for the week. Look at the trees out in front of your place. Most of the time, there can be problems. And just like us, if you can catch it early, you normally will have less problems. And not always. I mean, sometimes people don't like it because I look at a tree and go, you see those little tiny BB holes? Well, that means you've got borers. See a little bit of sap, a little sawdust, a little different color? That means you have borers. Borers are larval stages of beetles. And this is where I normally do my John Paul, Ringo, and the boys. Without Epi, we can't do rock and roll like we used to. No, not those beetles, but the beetles that get into your trees, and that can kill them. Considering that you will spend thousands and thousands to have a tree removed, it makes sense to have the tree checked. And in my case, usually I should say James does for me. I often go and point, and he often does the injection part. I don't get around like I used to, so it is so great to have a young son. In fact, I always tell James, if I knew I was going to have such a good son, I'd have had a couple of them. But he does a great job, and he likes the sciencey part because we're using a pretty safe pesticide, one that can be used actually on animals for fleas and things. But we also use different nutrient packs that we like to put into a tree because, as I always say, getting you healthy is half the battle. You know, when you go to, when you have a disease, you have a problem, you got to keep eating, you got to keep yourself up. And I know for some of you out there, you're going, well, I've never had a problem. Well, lucky you, and I hope that remains your ways throughout your life. I can say as you get older, you find often that perfect health is not as perfect as it once was. And I remember being a youngster thinking, that's never happening to me. I'll always be able to run faster, move quicker. And yes, that comes, and youth is fleeting. So Anyway, one of the things that I enjoy about gardening is that you can enjoy yourself out in the yard and garden. I find a peace in the garden that I really enjoy. You know, you can look at trees, I can look at the bark, I can look at the flowers, I can look at the pattern of the leaves, and I enjoy it. I enjoy seeing little plants coming up. I noticed yesterday my neighbor John was putting in some of his spring garden already. And it kind of pained me because I haven't done much gardening in the last, I've grown a few avocados, but I haven't done any real veggie gardening since, some problems I had, I guess, almost 7 years ago. But we won't go into that. But what I will go into is I do miss getting the ability to do some of the things that I used to do. And I used to love to go down to get my Earthbox material down at Ellington, give them a little free plug. If you're in there, say, hey, why aren't you doing stuff with Stan? Why aren't you doing stuff with Mr. Greenthumb? And if enough of you do, well, maybe they'll do some stuff with me again. I used to love to go down there and see their plants and their gardens and look at the veggies and say, how come they're doing so much better than everybody else? Well, one of the reasons is they usually get a really good soil. And if you start off with a good foundation, it's kind of like a building, you'll have much better results. So you can try to grow into your backyard dirt, and if you really sit and try to improve it, you can eventually make a better soil. But this takes a lot of effort. So I'm going to probably tell you that you need to go out and get a good soil that has organic matter in it, some peat moss, and it may be Michigan peat, it might be Canadian peat, might be even some Florida peat, but it's probably going to have some peat in it. Some people will add, of course, other organic matter to the soil, and this is where I would normally mention some of my old sponsors that you could improve your soil with, but I'm not going to mention them at the moment either. So, but let me say, one of my buddies there, Mr. Jeffrey, how are you today? Jeffrey, who's in Seminole.
Hey, I'm good. How are you today?
Oh, I'm just preaching in here about why people ought to improve their soil if they're going to plant a garden.
All right.
And one of the things people ask, how come the nursery can grow a better plant usually than I can? Or how does that, if you go down to the Earthbox people, how come theirs looks better than everyone else's? And usually it starts off with a really good soil. And the average person who tries to grow in their backyard has problems. I remember my father, who was a New York City boy, came down here and he thought he could just put stuff in containers and using our own back, yard northeast soil or sand, and that he was going to have great results. And he never did. Now, your mom, bless her heart, used to add a lot of organic matter to her soil, and she had a lot better results because, well, your mom had that good old Pennsylvania Dutch. I'm gonna improve the soil because that's what you do, and that's what we did in Pennsylvania, where we probably had a much better organic soil to begin with.
Yeah. Well, they used everything. The chicken manure went out on the field, and anything else that was organic got put in there.
Was that they put it on with a spreader type thing?
Oh, yeah. They'd shoot that stuff 30 feet in the air.
Yeah, I've seen some of those old spreaders that the old farmers used to use, and you better watch out. You better have a raincoat if you're anywhere near the back of it.
Yeah, and if you're driving, you better keep moving.
Yeah, no time for stopping the tractor, huh?
Or if the wind's coming the wrong way.
Yeah, and it had a bit of organic odor to it. But what kind of corn could you grow?
Well, they grew, the biggest crops were field corn, which were feed for animals.
Right.
And my grandfather probably had probably 25 acres of, when he grew field corn, he rotated.
Mm-hmm.
And some years it would be corn, which that stuff would get 8 feet tall, and big ears on it. And then other years he would grow wheat. But he always had his own, probably an acre of sweet corn that he would grow. And that, when we were up there in the summers, we went out selling sweet corn in the nearby city.
To the city slickers, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's funny because back in the old days, pretty much, and not even that far, but even when you and I were youngsters, really it was a much more agricultural growing community. And I find that even Pinellas, I remember as a youngster, you would see large citrus groves through many areas now that are condos. And
once you left Park Boulevard and US 19, you were headed out in the country. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember some old dirt roads, even where Keene Road. I remember Keene before it was paved.
Yeah, and it was all citrus. A lot of it was citrus.
I remember going out there as a youngster because some people had horses and stuff. And I remember being a youngster, and I forget who took me out there, but it was, I think, one of the ladies that worked, I think as a housekeeper, I think took me out there to see the farm and the little, the horses. And there was quite a few horses back then, so that was kind of fun. I mean, it was different. And I think Keene, if I remember, was like a 2-lane road. And even when I worked at Extension Service, our first office was the old fairgrounds, where I worked with Gil Witten and a bunch of other folks, Alan Cordell, and eventually I worked my way up to being a supervisor and working with Gil. And Gil was knowledgeable, and he had a good pattern that everybody liked. He'd drive me nuts sometimes because he'd wanted me to wear a tie if I went out in the middle of August to go look at some, grove or citrus or grass or some problem. But, often what I do is take the tie off as soon as I got out the gate and put it back on as soon as I was coming back in the gate of the fairgrounds. But Gil was the old school. He wanted, if you're going to be a professional, you wear a tie. And he was probably right at the time, though. I was somewhat of a rebellious soul and learned a lot from him. He was kind of like the father you have that could be really strict and tough, but you probably, in the end, it was probably good for me.
Mm-hmm.
So learned a lot. And he and I eventually had a few problems, but other than that, there was that. But other than that, I did enjoy my time there because I learned a lot because we were constantly getting people bringing in plants and questions. You didn't have the Google back then, so
nope.
Today, I find a lot of people can Google, but they really can't identify their own problem. But Jeffrey, stay with me we got to pay a few bills.
All right.
Which means when I hear the music, I've got about 15, 14, 13 seconds. And that means for you folks out there, if you want to give me a call later, you can at 813-289-1860. That's 813-289-1860.
Interested in having a home consult? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at AskMrGreenthumb.com. Broken air conditioner? Keep your home's AC running smoothly all year long with Easy Breezy AC. With thousands of active commercial and residential customers, Easy Breezy AC is Tampa Bay's most trusted HVAC company. Easy Breezy AC cares about those in need. Donate 2 cans of food and receive $20 off a $79 service call. Go to EasyBreezyAC.com and use promo code GreenThumb for an additional $10 off your service call. Call 727-856-HVAC. Life's hard. Comfort's not.
Why choose Stafford Tree Service? Is it because they're experienced, have the latest equipment, and friendly professional personnel? Absolutely. Stafford's positioned themselves as a leading tree trimming company in all of Tampa Bay. With honest professionals and competitive pricing, they'll earn your trust too. In business for over 15 years, Stafford Tree Service is licensed, bonded, and insured to provide you the very best tree trimming experience. Call today, 727-546-8786, 727-546-8786. On the web at StaffordTreeSVC.com.
Biophilia, our innate attraction to other living things. It's why people love plants. And around Tampa Bay, Plants, that's Plantz, is bringing nature inside, in workspaces and homes by delivering beautiful foliage plants. Our plants increase oxygen and filter out pollutants, reducing stress and improving productivity. And get you in touch with your biophilic side. Go to plantz.us.
Microsoft plans to lay off thousands of workers this year, all while the company invests more than $10 billion into ChatGPT. I'm Kim Commando, brought to you by SimpliSafe. Get a free indoor security camera plus 20% off with interactive monitoring at simplysafekim.com. If you've used ChatGPT, you know what it does. The AI chatbot writes letters, debugs code, answers any question you might have, and more. It's incredible. Once it improves, more tasks will be thrown its way. Just like cars ran down the horse and buggy in the early 20th century, AI will displace workers everywhere. Top industries at risk? Publishing, graphic design, and software programming. It sounds scary, but people always adapt to new tech. I mean, think about this. When the horse and buggy vanished, we had truck drivers and cabbies. There's a lot of room for AI to improve, and with it comes new opportunities. Microsoft may lay off to invest in ChatGPT, but a human will always be needed to monitor the AI. You can learn more about ChatGPT at my website. That's commando.com. Are you prepared for the unexpected? It's only a matter of time before your out-of-warranty vehicle is in the shop costing thousands. If that unexpected breakdown happened today, would you be ready? You can be with a plan through CarShield. When I needed a repair on an older vehicle, CarShield saved me over $4,000. With CarShield, I don't have to worry about what might happen to my car next. After all, your car is more than just getting you from point A to point B. From picking up your kids to going to a new restaurant, cars are an essential part of our lives. That's why CarShield offers protection plans to fit every budget and include 24/7 roadside assistance, courtesy towing, and rental car eligibility. Call now to save 20%, so you'll always be prepared for the unexpected. Call CarShield today at 800-858-2550 to save 20%, or visit carshield.com/Kim. That's 800-858-2550, or visit carshield.com/Kim to save 20%.
Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb in Real Estate Show. Got questions about perennial flowers? What about issues with closing on your newest property? Locally, call 813-289-1860. Toll free at 877-969-8600. And now your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
Yeah, today it's Stan and actually Jeff. But you don't have to be my son. But you and I have been friends forever and a day. It's funny, this last week I had Craig Chandler in and his lovely wife Linda, and we chit-chatted, and I told him you said hi, and he said hi back, and I thought it was funny. I remember when you and I and Craig were going to be, I think we're going to call ourselves the Nomads, because we could play, I could play C and G and E on the guitar, and I thought, well, heck, if I can learn 3 or 4 chords, I'm halfway there, and you could play better. And of course, Craig could play the organ or the piano pretty well. And so that was gonna be our rock and roll fame, but never quite developed. But I still remember what we were. Our goals were lofty. I think we were going to give the Beatles a run for their money, and so. If anybody wants to book the Beatle Light band, we're still here. And, I can do a good imitation of the Beatles, so that's all they need. Going back to your farming idea. Now, one of the things I always thought is great, now you were talking about adding everything organic out into the soil up in PA.
Yep.
And down here, people look at it and they go, wonder why it's not doing very well. And I go, well, because it's basically beach sand.
Yeah.
And we use the term soil pretty loosely. When I do check the pH here, it's usually really alkaline. And that's one of the problems. Most plants like about 5.5 to 6.5 if we're doing a pH test. And we're usually up around 8. 7.5 to 8. And because
get the sulfur out.
Yeah. And get that sulfur going, and you'll do usually better. And I proved it a number of times. I had some plants I was responsible for, some ligustrums and stuff, that were looking just horrible. I put some fertilizer, put some sulfur on them so the fertilizer could be taken in. And all of a sudden, you could see a remarkable change in the ligustrums. But the other thing I was thinking of earlier is, okay, so improve that organic matter, and people just don't do it, and fertilize more. I've been fertilizing a lime that I've had probably for, 15 or 20 years now, and it's kind of growing off. It looks kind of like a bonsai, because lemons and limes don't always tend to look perfectly symmetrical. But I don't worry too much about it. But I've been fertilizing it more, because about a year ago I thought, well, this thing looks like it's going to die. And I thought, well, I've been neglecting it, and I hadn't been able to be home that much. So it didn't get very much water. It almost died from lack of water. And especially anything in the containers, you have to start watching a lot closer than something that's in the ground.
Yeah.
But so I started fertilizing it a lot more, and it's blooming right now. I think I have 10 or 12 limes on there. So,
Yeah.
I'm Mr. Rich. I mean, I can brag about,
Well, and it also is motivating to see that reward.
It is.
It's like, roses are similar too. If you take care of them, they bloom.
Yep.
If you don't take care of them, they look at you and say, "You think I'm going to bloom for you?" Yeah.
I'll show you my black spot. People used to ask me, well, what do you get with roses sometimes? And I'd go black spot, powdery mildew, aphids, mites, and thrips. Other than that, they're trouble-free. And powdery mildew and downy mildew. But, they do require some work if you're going to grow a hybrid tea. Now, I raised a pretty tough variety named Don Juan, which is kind of a climber. And I never did very much with it except fertilize it on occasion, and it always did well for me. It's probably one of the tougher ones, but it's not a standard hybrid tea, that's going to require usually more fertilizer and more spraying. And there again, I'm not too worried about spraying. You can spray with things like dithium 45, which are basically zinc and manganese for the organic folks out there. Those are two natural elements. It's not something that was, test tubed up. And that's where a lot of people come to me and go, I don't want to use any chemicals. And I thought, I had a lady one time at one of my talks. She jumped up and as she was leaving, she goes, "You're one of those chemical people." And I said, well, we're all chemical people. There's, we're made from atoms, and we're made from proteins and carbohydrates and fats, what our body uses. But we have all kind of chemical things going on inside of us. But I wanted to.
Well, if you break it down, it's all chemical.
Sure, we're all.
Question is it good for your body? Probably not.
Well, yeah, and I would say use the least amount that you can. One of the things I like about injecting trees is in the old days, to kill borers, I had to spray with benzene hexachloride, which was lindane. And it was pretty toxic. I mean, I'd wear a respirator, and I looked like a spaceman if I was spraying your tree. Now I can use the same active ingredient that you can use on Fluffy's back, inject it into the vascular system, and, is it going to probably lower Fluffy's life maybe to 15 or 16 years from maybe 16 and a half? Probably. But is it good to have that 16 or years of good where they're not scratching every 2 minutes and living a life of flea misery? And by the way, if they're living in flea misery, you soon too will be living. Yeah, you're going to start to see those little welts on your legs. In fact, go into an apartment or a place where someone else has rented that they've had their little dog. And you'll find out if the fleas have no other host, you will soon find out that there were fleas on that little dog. I don't care how much they say they loved it and treated it and it didn't have a flea. Most animals can. Now, we're not dying like we did during the plague from fleas. And that's the reason rats got such a bad name back then, because the rats all carried the fleas. And when you look at a little rat, they're kind of cute. little mouse is kind of cute unless it's, getting into your grain, which it did back then. That's the other way.
Or walking through your living room.
Yeah, waving a flag, beating up on your dog or cat, then you may have a problem. But, I think that's interesting. But I also think it's interesting that America at one point was we were not far from being an ag society. And it worries me a little bit because now everything is big, huge corporate farms. And if they decide you're going to spend $5 for a loaf of bread, you're going to pay it. Well, we are paying $5 for a loaf of bread. What am I saying? So I remember as a youngster, and I don't want to get too much, I remember when, but a lot of the older folks can remember when bread was 25 cents. Coke was a dime, and it wasn't that long ago. Yes, I know I'm drifting into the age of getting older, but anyway, we'll talk more about that, maybe reminiscent lane here on AM 860, The Answer.
Want to talk real estate? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at AskMrGreenthumb.com. Did you know that Stan DeFreitas Mr. Greenthumb can come to your house and examine your plants, trees, and palms? His knowledge can help you become the envy of your neighborhood with lush, green, healthy trees that don't just live, but thrive. Palms and oak trees are part of what makes Florida a beautiful place to live, but they get diseases and are often cut down. We offer ways to save your trees. Call or text Stan today at 727-423-4794 or go online to AskMrGreenthumb.com. That's AskMrGreenthumb.com.
AM 860, The Answer. Listen on our website, theanswertampa.com. On 93.7 FM. W229DJ Dunedin. By downloading the Answer Tampa app or on TuneIn or Odyssey. Here's the latest from the Answer News Center.
With SRN News, I'm Michael Harrington in Washington. The Memphis police chief has disbanded the city's so-called Scorpion unit after some of its officers beat black motorist Tyree Nichols to death. The chief yesterday citing a cloud of dishonor, in her words, from newly released video of the fatal encounter. The nation and the city are struggling to come to grips with the violence by the officers, who are also black. Iran's defense ministry says one of its factories was attacked by drones in the central city of Isfahan yesterday, causing minor damage to a rooftop. There's also a fire that was apparently not related to the incident in Isfahan at the Iranian city of Tabriz. No word on why that happened. And British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has fired the chairman of the governing Conservative Party for, quote, serious breaches of ethics. He found that Nadeem Zahawi was not paying his taxes while running the Treasury. This is SRN News.
AM 860, The Answer.
Online at theanswertampa.com.
AM 860, The Answer.
You're an author writing a Christian book, so you may know this cheery little fact. Old-fashioned publishers reject thousands of manuscripts each year. You know your book is fabulous, but hey, if it's not what a publisher needs, all you need is your book in print. You want it on Amazon. You want to spread the word the way you've written it, so do it. Forget old-fashioned publishing. Publish yourself with 21st century Christian publishing at Zulon Press. Fast and affordable, Zulon Press gives you the power to put your Christian book on the market the way you want it. Zulon Press knows your mission because they have the same mission. Publish your book, see it on Amazon, be a published author with Zulon Press. Learn more with your free guide to Christian publishing. Visit ChristianPublishing.com. Get your book hot off the press. Zulon Press. Find your free publishing guide at ChristianPublishing.com. Zulon Press is a division of Salem Communications, the same great people who bring you this nifty radio station.
Time is the ultimate luxury. I am Dennis Prager. Fill your time beautifully at Corona Cigar Company. The entire Corona building is a humidor. 5,000 square feet of cigar smoking pleasure. Select from hundreds of open boxes of premium cigars, including Florida sun-grown 20-acre farm. It's Tampa's quintessential cigar experience. 4142 West Boy Scout Boulevard, minutes from TIA. When I'm in Tampa, I fill quality time at Corona Cigar Company.
Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb and Real Estate Show. Connect online at AskMrGreenthumb.com. Got questions about gardening, real estate, or both? Locally, call 813-289-1860. Toll free at 877-969-8600. And now, your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And James is off on assignment, and I have a guest and friend, Jeffrey, and you're still with me?
I'm still with you.
I was looking at my old radio bag I found last night, which I said radio bag. It's a bag I used to carry that I'd have pamphlets and some magazine stuff, like I don't have enough. But one of the things I had in there was the old Lewis Maxwell had a couple little series of books, and he's passed on a number of years ago. But he was a really good horticulturist, I must admit. As a youngster, he would often have these stories about this nursery or this grove or this place. One of the things he used to put on the back of his little gardening booklet was that, and it says, it can happen here. Now, this booklet is probably 25 years old, but he quotes the Marcus Aurelius, I think it was, and the quote is, "The budget should be balanced, for the treasury should be refilled, the public debt should be reduced, the arrogance of the officialdom should be tempered and controlled, assistance to foreign lands should be curtailed, lest we become bankrupt. The mob should be forced to work and not depend upon the government for subsistence." And that was 48 BC. That was, I think, Syrio was Marcus Syrio, I guess it was. And it was 48 before Christ by, almost 48 years. He was saying all that, and that was to Rome because they were kind of like us. I guess we were kind of like Rome, only on steroids, because it's funny when you ask somebody about the debt and they go, well, you never have to really worry about a debt. And I'm going, well, if you run a business or you run a household, you have to kind of depend upon how much money coming in and how much money's going out. Anyway, yeah. I saw that and I thought, he loved to put up that on the back of most of his little gardening books. And he was real worried about that. Now we're talking, 1960s and 70s. That he was worried about our national debt, and so he wanted to go back and quote, what was around before the time of Christ, and that was that you had mobs that expected and didn't want to work. And yeah. So it's. I
got a question for you.
Okay.
I got these philodendron salomes, and they got out of hand,
Did they get cooked at all by the cold?
No,
No? Some of them, some did.
They're in kind of sheltered area, and so they don't, and this is, we're close to the water, so we really didn't get that cold.
Right.
So anyway, I want to move some of them, and the stems on those now are about maybe 7-8 feet long.
Sure, like a boa constrictor.
Yeah. So, and if you cut them back, if you cut the stem off, they'll put out a new stem.
They will.
Pretty quickly.
Yep.
What I'm wondering is if I cut the stem off and then dig it out and move it,
there's a good chance it'll survive.
You think?
Yeah, I'd probably let them dry a little bit for a day or so out of the garden. Not forever, but for a day or two. Then I would take most of those leaves off So you just have a little bit of green on top, kind of like you're doing a big cutting, only you're working with something the size of a boa constrictor. But I wouldn't go with too big a piece, but I might go with a piece that's even a foot or two.
Well, I'm going to dig the roots out.
Okay, you'll have the roots. Okay, well, if you're going to move the roots, then it should just go through a little bit of shock. It'll probably go through it easier if it's a little bit in the shadier side than hot, full sun. But now it's probably...
Well, they really don't like full sun.
No, they start to yellow out. They like it in a little shade. They're an understory plant. Most of the philodendron family really is an understory plant. Now, they can adapt some, and pothos can too, which is a offshoot, second cousin of it, if you will. But that whole family of philodendrons tend to,
take over.
They tend to take over. Well, you can kind of learn a little bit, even going back to the name. The Latin name philo, meaning love, and dendron, meaning tree. And so they are tree lovers. And the reason we see them around trees or under the shade is that's where philodendrons grow their best. They like being underneath that. There's a canopy, so they're not out in the hot, full sun. They can adapt to it. When people say, well, I have mine, and it's out getting a pretty good sunlight most of the day. Yes, they can. And many plants
I think they can adapt to anything.
Yeah, they're tough. Well, that's where I make the analogy back to the boa constrictor.
Try killing them.
When you come back and you can't find your house after being on vacation, you go, it was that philodendron. Or, if you've got the pepper tree, the Skynus terebinthifolius, which is the kind of a weedy tree that we have. It will
Florida holly.
Yeah, Florida holly, sometimes called. I was just thinking about that the other day. I remember when you and we'd make those wreaths, and Randy. I think he was our genius coming up with our ideas for wreaths. But we'd get out there and paint them with gold and this and that, and we actually made things look kind of okay. I thought, I don't know, Brazilian pepper being, kind of third cousin to poison ivy for some people might be a problem. But, it was one of those plants that if my dad worked with, we had one in the backyard, he would break out with all kind of rash from the sap from it. He was just susceptible to it. I remember playing the stuff and getting sap all over me. And, of course, it was as sticky as pine tar, just about to get off. But,
that's nasty.
By the way, it'll burn real fast, too, if you put it into a fire when those berries are on it. It will, you'll see it. It's like you put gasoline on something. That thing will go up in a hurry if it's into a fire that's already there. So just for fun sometime, if you're out burning some stuff in the backyard for whatever, put a little sprig or two of that Brazilian pepper in there. And,
we try not to see that in our yard.
No, I would. Yeah. Well, sometimes it just comes in. The birds.
Oh, I know. It's a constant battle.
It was one of those evasive, kind of like punk tree. A lot of people brought in these trees thinking they were doing good. They thought, well, it'll suck up all the extra water in the, down those areas, especially toward Okeechobee and the Glades. It turned out we really didn't want to suck up all that water. Some of that water was a natural ecosystem that we probably should have just left alone.
Yeah.
But there's two things. It's usually man, and then usually the government comes in and goes, we'll fix it. And often it's more of a problem. I mean, I was reading in the book by Valerie Truett. She has a book on rings. She's a dendrochronologist, and we had her on the air. In some of the areas where they used to let the nature would burn off some of the undergrowth, and you had less super fires when nature took care of it, than when we go through and we thought, well, we'll plant them all real close together, and there's no windbreak, and what could go wrong? We'll not let that undergrowth get burned out. And sometimes burning out, and today you'll see it where they'll go in and burn out some of the undergrowth so that you don't get this massive fire material going. And they'll put big breaks in between areas of trees, which, it's funny. If you look back in the dendrochronology and you look at the trees, you can see when they were burned a little bit, going back for hundreds of years and literally thousands of years. So anyway, I did find her book very interesting, and I've been kind of reading a few pages at a time. I haven't quite finished it yet, partly because I start one book and then I'm starting 3 others usually at the same time. But anyway, she has a history of trees, and Valerie Truett, dendrochronologist. I recommend that you go buy the book because she did a good job of giving us kind of the history of trees. They can look at rings and they could tell. I think one of the Stradivaria wasn't real. I mean, it was real, but it was a copy, if I remember right. And they found out by looking at the rings of the wood. So I thought that was pretty interesting. You can go back to the time of Christ and before. You can go back in trees and tell what kind of wood was being used where, or what kind of wood was used even on, ships that were sunk out in the out there, because they've been there for hundreds of years and they're kind of well preserved if they're at the bottom sometimes.
And you don't need to try and carbon date it because it's right there.
Yeah, you can count the rings, and sometimes they will cross date, and they'll also cross date with ice cores and things to see what happened. But it's one of the things in her book she talks about when she wrote Frankenstein. Shelley, it was a year of darkness. They had all these volcanoes exploded, and so the trees and everything kind of said, hey, we can't go through our normal, system that we go through. So they can look at the rings and tell when that occurred. And it's certainly what had occurred is that they couldn't travel that much. So she was kind of pent up and decided they were retelling stories. And of course, the Frankenstein story evolved. But it's kind of funny how one thing leads to another, to another, to another.
Yeah.
So,
or was it Frankenstein?
Frankenstein. Well, yeah, probably. I'm sure they would pronounce it differently. I remember being in Europe, and I'd say something, they'd go, no, it's not how we'd pronounce it. We pronounce it this way. And, hey, I'm making an attempt to say your language sometimes. So, and when I was in Holland, I went, Dunku. It sounds a lot like Danka. Oh, no, not to the Dutch. Danku and Danka, totally different. So it's a lot of your language sounds pretty Germanic. No, we don't want to hear that. And I thought, well, you can say that if you want, but I'm just telling you what it looks like to me. Anyway, so that was fun. I was amazed the number of words, of course, if you're in any of the Spanish countries, a lot of our derivations of words come from the Latin. And so you can kind of pick out some of the words easy enough. I was even looking at some words recently. My wife's learning some Danish, and why, I don't know. But she looked at it, and I said, well, some of those words, you can certainly see the root words that go back that are very similar to some of the English or German or to Latin, certainly Latin and Greek. Anyway, you want to stay with me for another segment?
Yeah, sure.
All righty, why not? Stay with us as the Plant Talk Real Estate Talk continues here on AM 860, The Answer.
Want to talk real estate? Call James DeFreitas at 727-254-7127 or go online, aflre.com.
Why choose Stafford Tree Service? Is it because they're experienced, have the latest equipment, and friendly professional personnel? Absolutely. Stafford's positioned themselves as a leading tree trimming company in all of Tampa Bay. With honest professionals and competitive pricing, they'll earn your trust too. In business for over 15 years, Stafford Tree Service is licensed, bonded, and insured to provide you the very best tree trimming experience. Call today, 727-546-8786, 727-546-8786. On the web at staffordtreesvc.com.
Biophilia, our innate attraction to other living things. It's why people love plants. And around Tampa Bay, Plants, that's Plantz, is bringing nature inside, in workspaces and homes by delivering beautiful foliage plants. Our plants increase oxygen and filter out pollutants, reducing stress and improving productivity. And get you in touch with your biophilic side. Go to plantz.us.
Every 40 seconds, a kid is reported missing. Find the Children provides educational material that teaches your kids how to recognize and avoid predators. Our recovery programs are very successful in bringing kids back home to their family. You can help protect our kids and bring the missing kids home safe by donating your unwanted car, truck, SUV, or van, running or not. We guarantee you will receive the maximum tax deduction. We provide fast free pickup, usually within 24 hours. Over 2,000 kids are reported missing every day. Call now to donate your vehicle. Donate now to bring these kids home safe.
Call 800-745-2882. 800-745-2882. 800-745-2882.
Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb in Real Estate Show. Got questions about perennial flowers? What about issues with closing on your newest property? Locally, call 813-289-1860. Toll free at 877-969-8600. And now your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And James is off on assignment. Let me mention to you, I have someone looking today at the condo that we have. Of course, James and I work with James, who owns Dream It Real Estate. Yes, we were with all the big guys, and we just wanted to do our own thing, and James in particular. And so we have a condo at 1900 59th Avenue North, number 112. We've got some folks looking at it today. Priced right at $145,000. It's a 2-1, beautiful complex there. They've got a pool, they've got shuffleboard, they've got all kinds of things. It's a 55-plus community. So if you're looking for that, and I know a lot of young people go, hey, I'm 55, I like it. They've got a pool, they've got shuffleboard, they've got the cornhole, they've got all this neat stuff. And their pool is beautiful. Their library is nice. I looked at the library they had there, and they've got, it would rival many small libraries. And so I was really impressed with the place. It is concrete. You know, it's just a very nice place for its type. 2-1, Carol has it just really very nicely done. So you'll like her taste, I think. And if you want to change something when it's yours, well, you could. But if you want to give me a call later, I will make sure that you can go see it, and just give me a call at 727-423-4794. That's my cell. Don't call me right now because I'm on the air. 727-423-4794. And so I have Jeffrey, who is with me, and we were talking a little bit about farming and farming communities. The U.S. in the last 50 years has changed dramatically as a farming community. I remember my Aunt Edith, Aunt BB, used to call up Hood's Dairy, and she'd call them up like at 4 a.m, and they'd go, hello, Mrs. Rolls. And she'd go, well, I know you got to be up because if you're having cows, you got to be milking them. And they had a farm, I guess, on the upper New York State area where my great-great-grandfather was a Union drummer boy during the Civil War. And I bring that back because I remember one time, today you'd been probably arrested, but Jeffrey brought in a musket, a musket from the, wouldn't be for the Confederate, it would have been for the Pennsylvania, probably whatever the number would have been for up there.
It was probably somebody's hunting musket.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it ever... You
don't think it saw action?
Saw action. It had been fired a lot, though. The barrel's bent on it.
Yeah, well, we don't know.
Slightly
bent?
Yeah, you got to aim high.
Did you ever fire it off?
Oh no.
No, okay.
No, it was. You'd have to get black powder and all that stuff. It was not. It's a relic, is what it is.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of guys that still like to go back out, and you'll have the Union guys over here, Confederate guys over there, and they'll reenact the battles of the Civil War.
This is how times have changed. I took that to school in 5th grade for show and tell.
Yeah.
And I carried that thing on the 1 mile walk to school, and nobody said anything to me.
I remember. Yeah. Well, I remember you and I used to ride our bikes out to Oweden Island, and we'd carry our BB guns. Not that we were shooting anything, but maybe cans and stuff out there. But we thought that was great fun too, because we'd try to find the place where supposedly there was a studio where Tarzan had been filmed at one point. Not so sure how much of that was accurate, but we looked for the Sierra Madre in old Northeast St. Pete. But it's funny, a lot of places I go down there now and I remember old seawalls that you and I put our old John boat off of as we were going to conquer all of Tampa Bay, catching all the trout and pinfish and catfish that we could. Mostly catfish.
Yep.
But anyway, those were great old days. So, I think you talked about your philodendrons. I know I injected your pines sometimes before.
Yeah.
We've kept those alive. And someone asked me the other day, well, if you get borers and pines, the pine's going to die. And I thought, well, not necessarily. I did my neighbors some years ago. They're still alive. So they don't have to die. I mean, there's a certain point. If it drops all the needles, you can probably give the tree, last rites. The tree's going to die. But if you catch it early, even in pines, and in oaks even more so, I can say oaks, keep them going. The guy asked me the other day, okay, this is a real dull oak, this whole live. It does have some borers. Can you keep it going? And I said, well, I'm willing to bet money it will be here longer than you and I.
Mm-hmm.
And he's probably a little younger than me. But I said, with me, I don't know. Who knows what time you have? Who knows how much any of us have as far as time goes.
Very true.
But and that's one of the reasons you should go out and savor it. And I was thinking the other day, a lot of the plants like podocarpus that every landscape, Granddaddy Wedding put in, seemed to have some podocarpus in them, and he would also use heavy with pittosporums. I don't see pittosporums being used like they used to be.
Well, that's because they all died off.
Well, see,
they have a short life expectancy.
Granddad Wedding knew.
You know what he used? He used the Ilex nana or Ilex vomitorial.
Yep.
And podocarpus. I mean, as far as a hedge, you can't beat a podocarpus. But the problem with it is it takes so long to grow.
Yeah, that's
it's not the magic. Oh, we got a hedge in a year.
But the other side is you don't have to go out and cut it. I mean, I saw a neighbor of mine. Well, not really a neighbor, but let's say 4 blocks away from me. They put in a hedge of viburnum. And the things were growing quickly, and they did. And I said, well, the biggest problem I have with the viburnum odoratisum is it wants to be a 40-foot tall tree eventually. Mm-hmm. And so the viburnum grows like thunder. Unless you want to be trimming that sucker all the time, it's going to probably outgrow your situation. So, that's the reason you need Stan DeFreitas' Complete Guide to Florida Gardening. It's actually out of print right now. I have a few copies for a few people who are willing to pay any amount just to get one of the final copies that I have, unless I go into a reprint. And I don't know if we're going to do that or not. We've talked to the folks at the printers, but I loved my book because the cover was done by a guy who did stuff for Walt Disney. He did Tron, and back when Disney was something you could take your kids to and not have to worry about what they were going to see. But that's a whole different political animal. The book had 300 color prints in the book, and I was really proud of my book. Today, I talked to the publisher, and they go, well, we can shrink the thing by half, cut out all the color, and, I said, then it's not my book anymore. It's something else.
Yeah.
We're talking something that's going to be a lot smaller and maybe not
Well,
as attractive.
isn't it called the Complete Gardening Guide?
It is, yes. It's a complete guide to Florida gardening.
It would be incomplete. You'd have to change the title to Incomplete Gardening.
Well, that's kind of like the U.S. government, the almost fair government. But
or Volume 2 is the other half of it.
Well, I'm toying with, if they don't, maybe having it reprinted myself, just because. Of course, in the old days, I was on PBS Channel 3 for 12 years, and I was on with Jack Harris on Channel 13 weekly for years and years, both at 13 and 8. So I enjoyed doing that. I actually produced my own show for 12 years on PBS, and producer just meaning getting people in, and trying to help make sure you had some money to cover the costs, so PBS could make a little bit of money in the process. But I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed learning a little bit about television. A lot of the guys I worked with knew a lot more about putting television together than I did, but I tried to listen to often what they had to say, and often, I'd sit in there with Joe Wisicki over at Channel 13. He'd say, "You want to learn how to be a producer?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Get in here and sit next to me and watch what I do." And I said, "Sure." So I did for a number of years. I would sit next to Joe, and I'd go in and do my 2 or 3 minutes with Jocular Jack, by God, West Virginia. And, it was fun. It was a good learning experience on how to put television together. And they say a lot of the young people came from the University of South Florida, so they'd often be telling me about things that they thought I should know. And there again, I learned from many of my contemporaries at the time, went on to do big things. Jeff, thanks for being on with me today.
Hey, well, good to talk to you. Always is. And you keep up the good work.
I appreciate it, and we will talk again, my friend. For the rest of you out there, enjoy your life and garden, and as my old buddy Teddy used to say, go out there and live it up.
Interested in having a home consult? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at AskMrGreenthumb.com.